It's my great honor to be here with all of you today to talk a little bit in a brief tour de force about the emerging science of mindfulness training for parents, teachers, and children. And I just want to thank the Dalai Lama Center and the organizers for inviting me. And I also want to thank all of you for being here. For all of the scientists and interventionists among us who do this work, we recognize that it's you who are the small moral forces working through the capillaries of the world, as William James put it, that eventually will rend the most prideful monuments of humans. So we really appreciate the collaboration with you. Just turn this on, see if it works. So as I was preparing for this talk, Maria asked me to contemplate the question of why mindfulness now? And I'm from Portland, Oregon, where His Holiness is giving a talk today, so I threw a heart in there. And I was contemplating, why would we need mindfulness for parents and children now? And I was having a lot of trouble coming up with the answer. And as so often happens in life, an answer found me. As I was sitting in my car in Portland, a little bit hard to see, but there was a bumper sticker in front of me that said, "Non-Judgment Day is coming." So that's pretty good. I think that's a good reason. But I think it's a difficult concept for us, and Cliff and many were talking about last night. What is mindfulness? What are the key ingredients? So I just wanted to start out talking a little about this concept, if you remember, paying attention in the present moment, on purpose, intentionally, non-judgmentally, is John's definition of mindfulness. John Kabat-Zinn. So I thought I would turn to another expert on non-judgment to just set the stage for us, Herbie Hancock. For those of you who don't know, he was a very creative jazz musician, and it turns out that he also finds this concept of non-judgment as critical to flexibility and creativity in the way that Adele said. So let's take a listen.
Sticking my head in the music all the time.
Herbie Hancock's own musical journey began as a boy in Chicago. Classically trained, he was good enough to perform with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra at a youth concert at age 11. Turning to jazz, Hancock gained sudden and international fame in his early 20s with his first great collaborator and mentor, Miles Davis. An early lesson came at a concert in Europe. At first, Hancock says, everything was going right.
We had the audience in the palm of our hands. And right as everything was really peaking and Miles was soloing, I played this chord and it was completely wrong. and Miles took a breath and then played some notes. And the notes made my chord right.
The notes made your chord right.
Yeah, somehow what he chose to play fit my chords to the structure of the music.
And what did you learn from that?
What I learned from that is that Miles didn't hear the chord as being wrong. He just heard it as something new that happened. So he didn't judge it. I learned the importance of being non-judgmental. Taking what happens and trying to make it work. That's something you should apply to life too.
So how did you learn to use that to make your own individual voice?
If you're not judging what happens, then you're trusting what they're doing, what they're playing, and trusting what you're playing. And it can lead you to other ideas, to something maybe you hadn't expressed before.
And so this idea of paying attention on purpose, non-judgmentally, we could also think about we could think about this word non-judgmentally as without immediate emotional reaction or conceptual evaluation. And I mention this here because for teachers and parents, we all are aware of this idea of wait time. And I love the metaphor of the fire, and it's really the spaces in between the logs that makes the fire burn. And so it is with teaching and learning. As you know, on average, we wait about, I think I'm a little below average, about a second after we ask a question, or after someone responds, about a second before we say something else. And it turns out that 3 seconds turns out to create a lot of change in terms of the cognitive abilities of a young person in particular to respond. And so maybe practicing mindfulness and being non-judgmental, being able to take in information without immediately having to respond or react to it or do anything with it is really key for caregiving, and I think we all know that. And it turns out with special needs children, this idea of wait time, research shows, turns out to be even more important, obviously. And so I think as we move into the 21st century in a world that's increasingly hot, crowded, and flat in terms of somewhat flat in terms of economic opportunity, the idea of fostering creativity, this ability to trust one another, and to try to arrive at solutions without lapsing into reactive habits or biases is just critically important. So with that brief introduction about non-judgment and mindfulness, I would like to just launch into a quick overview of the emerging science on children, mindfulness with children, adolescents, and caregivers. In my own thinking, I framed this as a project, the Contemplative Science Project, and it's been going on for centuries, really, the exchange between East and West. But most particularly in the last 50 years, there's been several waves of science on the effects of meditation. And today, we're really trying to build a field called contemplative or developmental contemplative science, which is focused on what is the possibility and prospects for self-transformation through different kinds of mental training across the lifespan. So as Cliff was alluding to in his own wayward and illustrious history with the adepts and then also with these long-term meditation practitioners, we now have some good studies that really show after significant meditation practice, it seems to be the case that people can learn to embody as a habit being calm, being very clear-minded, able to perceive what's happening without biases or judgments or reactions, as we just spoke about, and also being very altruistic and other-centered. And the question for us here today is, what is the prospect for a little boy like me in early childhood through certain kinds of training of attention and emotion to move in those directions? What about in adolescence, in college, and in parents? And the paradigm that we're working on in the contemplative science is that these traits that Goldie Hawn was talking about that help us to learn how to be fully human is a form of learning. And so we think about it as a movement from the status of a novice towards a status of an expert with respect to these skills of staying calm and having a clear perception of reality and the like. And the idea here is that at 10,000 hours in any given domain, we become expert. But what's so exciting, and someone asked Cliff, we always get this question, how much do I have to do, 10,000? And the answer is, wow, there's data that within 5 hours of training, we can see changes in the brain. Now it's sort of like, as someone said, when you go to the gym, if you work out, if I stop working out, do I get to keep those muscles? And the answer is probably not. So we think the same thing, but nonetheless, as many of you might have experienced for yourself or with your students, I've heard nice stories, within a very small amount of time, there can be a benefit that we personally experience through these practices. And someone was asking me, well, why is science so important to all of this? And it turns out that the meeting place of the great contemplative traditions and their inward science of human consciousness and the psychology of science and neuroscience, biology, social science, they meet around this idea that we can actually change ourselves through intentional practice, just as we go to the gym, and that we can investigate to see if that's true or not. Both from the contemplative side, there's that openness, and the science side, so that shared hypothesis is what's really brought us together here today. And, yes. So I thought this is a nice slide by David Black, and for those of you who are interested in such things, there's something called the Mindfulness Research Guide, which is updated every month with the new studies. And what David Black is doing for all of us is charting the progress and development of this contemplative science project, this study of the effects of programs that teach meditations of various kinds on the body and the brain and the mind and our social relationships. And the first study for MBSR was published in 1980, according to David's work. And as you can see, there's just been a linearly increasing amount of publications, research grants, and research dollars from places like the National Institute of Health in the United States, all following the same trend. The red arrow here is the first randomized control trial of mindfulness training for students. That happened in 2003. So 10 years later, my take-home message for you is we're just at the beginning here. And what David calculated was that of all of these publications since 1980, only 5% are on children and adolescents. So just in the natal period of this emerging science. On this diagram, I've depicted some of the cornucopia is the image that I'm trying to give of programs and conferences like this one that have occurred since the change in the millennium. And so many of the people here, Linda Lantieri is going to speak to us, was there early, Cultivating Emotional Balance with Margaret Cullen and Cliff and Alan Wallace. So many programs for teachers and parents and children have evolved in the last 13 years. And so I think we could safely say now we live in a time, and you all know this in Vancouver probably like no one else in the United States, where there are now programs for children all across the life course and various programs for parents and teachers. And as Kim was saying, we really now have also a cornucopia of developmentally appropriate practices, because obviously one size is not going to fit all in this kind of a thing, given the focus on development. And again, as Adele said, I'll make sure these slides are available. So I just thought I would spend a few minutes on, well, what is it that these programs, in essence, are trying to do from a scientific perspective, as I understand it at least. And so I want to just talk a little about what did I mean when I said training attention and emotion. What does that actually mean in a concrete way? So the first thing I think we're trying to understand is how all of us as human beings can move from this sort of default state habit that we have of our mind wandering to the future or wandering to the past, which research shows is not necessarily a happy state of mind when the mind is wandering. So we're just trying to train the mind to be able to focus on one thing. And this is why the focus, the brain breaks is so sweet. It's just a little exercise, a little mental exercise 3 times a day to build the flabby muscle of focused attention and concentration. And we know from research that focus can bring a sense of calm awareness into the mind and the body. And we experienced that so beautifully in the body scan that we had earlier. Just by focusing the mind on our own bodies, the room became so still, so quiet. And then we want to train a second habit. We want to move from the default habit, what? Huh? I'm sorry, what was going on? Was I giving a talk? Mindlessness, to a state of mindfulness. And the key thing here is that when you get a little concentration ability, you're better able to, as Goldie Hawn was saying, then take your concentrated mind and focus on what does it mean to eat a raisin mindfully. So now I can focus on my senses and become mindful of my sensory experience, mindful of bird song. But there has to be a mind that's not just wandering aimlessly to be able to appreciate that. You know, in India, they have an image of training the mind, and it's pulling an ox. And I had a picture in India of someone trying to pull an ox to make it go their way. It's very hard to train the mind. So time, and we build up these 2 habits. And as I said already, the main practice that's in the literature today with young people and adults, we start there often in programs, is this focusing on the breath, this focused meditation on a single object, often the breath. It can be sound. And there's pretty good evidence that kids, there is evidence, as you know, that they can do that and benefit from that. We don't have great evidence yet, if we can, empirical evidence that can improve achievement. I know Kim has some data, but pretty much we're not quite there yet. This is a study from college students that did show that mindfulness training improved working memory, what? Remembering what you're doing, reduced mind wandering, and the kids did better on the GRE scores. So we're not too far from those studies. They just haven't been done yet. And the authors conclude by saying, our results suggest that cultivating mindfulness is an effective and efficient technique for improving cognitive function with wide-ranging consequences. So I do think we could see these practices affecting achievement. We just don't have the data yet. Well, what about the other side? Cliff talked some last night about training emotion, and this is my own understanding of what that might mean, coming from Secular Ethics in His Holiness's book. So all of us have, to greater or lesser degrees, the habit of reacting to situations emotionally, whether in terms of, oh, she's just the most wonderful, or, oh, I can't stand this. And so we're trying to, through practice, reduce reactivity and to be able to relate to and regulate our emotions better. And in this way, especially for little ones, this is the road to becoming a personally responsible citizen, right? That we can't be hitting or taking people's stuff or whatever it is, no harming and the like. So that's the first step. And I kind of think in terms of a secular ethics, if we got this one for the whole world, let's pack it in. You know, that's pretty good. People would just start to be a little personally responsible. But just in case we're in Canada and you have a social responsibility mandate, there is a second level. And that goes to sorry, I shouldn't be turning my back to the camera, I realize. The question of moving out of ego self-interest and becoming a pro-social individual that helps others and that offers support. So how do we cultivate not only restraint and self-control, as Adele was talking about, on our impulsive actions, but also generate what she was speaking about as that ruach, that desire to be a good person and to help others. And then for some, there's, of course, you have to kind of regulate your emotions to be able to attend to the needs of others, we know. So that's important. And then the AP course here is to sort of go beyond self-interest altogether and make your life an offering for the well-being of others, what His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls altruism. And, well, we have some really fun activities for cultivating that within some of these mindfulness programs. Here's from Goldie's program, Mindfulness of Ourselves in the World. So using our focused mind in the service of benefiting others is a way to do that. And I would say, again, we actually know very little, with the exception of some of the research that's done by Kim and our colleagues here in Vancouver, about whether or not mindfulness training actually helps us to become nicer, kinder, more helpful people. And I think that's really the goal of this for all of us. There is a study that's about to come out in Psych Science, again, with that ubiquitous population of college students, that suggests that mindfulness training for 8 weeks increased compassionate responding. They had some half went through mindfulness, half didn't, and then they had all the study participants come into the lab. And there was 2 Confederates, 2 people who were in leagues with the researchers sitting in the waiting room. And the other people, the research participants, come in. They take a seat, and there's only one seat left. They sit in it. And then I think a woman on a crutch or with a broken leg comes in to the same room. And they just see within 2 minutes who gets up to offer the chair or not. And it turns out that the people who had received mindfulness training were much more likely to do that. And that was interesting because the Confederates are sitting there not doing it. So they're really pulling for bystander apathy. That is, the situation is really telling them, don't do anything. And somehow by being awake, they say, oh my gosh, you should sit down more than the rest of us. Okay, so I just want to summarize. Wow, was I supposed to do parents and teachers too? No, I get there. So we have programs. We're just at the beginning. We really don't have rigorous studies yet. The programs do show, as many of you know in your own classrooms, that the kids find them feasible and acceptable. And I would say the 2 preliminary findings we have at this point are there are indications that this work does increase executive function, as Adele was speaking about, those flexibility, self-control. And it turns out, which came up earlier, it seems to be in the hands of a competent mindfulness teacher that it can really help with symptoms of depression and anxiety in youth. We really don't know much about changes in behavior. Okay, so I just want to say a little about the work on mindfulness for teachers and parents, and I'm going to start with my summary in case I run out of time. Again, I think there are numerous parent and teacher programs, so to speak, out on the market. We have CARE here, we have SMART program here, which are two teacher-focused programs. SMART has also been taught to parents. There's Amy Saltzman has parents programs, just many out there on the market. I would say we still have very few rigorous studies of the effects of these programs at this point. However, again, we think the data shows that parents and teachers find these kinds of programs feasible. That is, they can complete them and acceptable, they like them. And so far, there's been 3 findings that I'm aware of with teachers and parents. Actually, there's a little more data coming out, which I don't know if I should talk about, but there is some suggestion we can improve our own focused attention and working memory. And Kim and I did that study in Vancouver, and we found that among teachers in the VSB. That the program, Kim and I found that it really reduces occupational stress and burnout, as well as symptoms of anxiety and depression. There will be a few new studies coming out that shows that you can actually teach parents to use these techniques to improve their relationship with their adolescent children. And one of the key findings there was parents learned how to just wait a little more and not react, practicing that non-judgment. So here's a model that we've been thinking about, and I guess I want to say here, the important part of this research for us is not to forget you, the caregivers. We know that the engine that drives human development forward is relationships with other people, and so we think one of the most important interventions for helping to improve the prospects of children is helping their parents and their teachers, as many have said. And the goal of these programs is to increase mindfulness and improve the well-being of the parent. I would say that's sort of the personal use of mindfulness, and I'm going to suggest that one of the things it does for caregivers is it helps them to refill the tank, which is often empty because caregivers are often giving so much. And then the hypothesis is, as we can renew and renew our resources, we're in a much better position. In fact, we have more emotional and physical energy to invest in the caregiving activity itself. And this is something we don't know very much about, the interpersonal dimension of mindfulness. What is the effect of all this on our ability to be present, to be there for each other? As Cliff said last night, the theory here is, in case of emergency, please place oxygen mask on self first, and then assist your child. And I took this from a friend at Stanford. He used to talk about filling the tank, and we think that's really step 1 for caregivers. So many are exhausted, and it's kind of funny, but it turns out that, well, I'll show it in a moment. So we think step 1 with the caregivers is filling the tank. Now, this is just a small piece of data from a study Kim and I did here in Vancouver. And what this shows is that before mindfulness training, teachers were feeling, pretty exhausted at work emotionally. And then after training, we get a reduction in those feelings of emotional exhaustion among those who have received training. And emotional exhaustion, it turns out, as many of you may know, is the core symptom of occupational burnout. We also found, and others have as well, that mindfulness training can help with sleep. It turns out that in the United States, I believe this is true in Canada too, I tried to check, there is an epidemic of insufficient sleep in the culture. And here you can see that adults report that they have trouble concentrating on things, remembering things, or even performing their work because of sleep-related deficits. So it's a real problem in the United States. And I just wanted to show you another small piece of data from the trials, randomized controlled trials that Kim and I ran here and also in the United States. And what we were able to show in this research was that all of the teachers, and this again isn't a surprise to you all, were getting less than the adult average, which is 7 hours in the United States. They're getting about 6.5 hours. And then after training, these are self-report data, the teachers in the mindfulness training reported they had sort of filled their tank up to the average amount of sleep needed. And so we think, and the last thing I'll say is we found a key mechanism for that was that the teachers in our studies reported that they were not ruminating on their work as much when they were at home. And in fact, their moods improved over time at home as well. So there was sort of a spillover effect, if you would, of the training. So once the tank is filled, we have one nice model out there. Well, there's several nice models. John and Mila Kabat-Zinn have one, and Doug Coatsworth, and Larissa Duncan, Mark Greenberg, and I don't know the first name of Mr. Nix or Ms. Nix have one. And they believe that mindfulness training can really help in the caregiving role in 5 different ways. I've already alluded to them. It can help us to listen more mindfully and to practice that 3-second wait time. It can enhance this non-judgmental habit that many of us have just as a function of being who we are. Can increase the awareness of emotion so that we can become aware of it, not suppressing it and not getting carried away by it, but develop a new relationship with it. Can enhance self-regulation and compassion. And so I thought I would end, if it's okay. I have a short video, and it's from some of the teachers who went through the SMART training. Margaret Cullen is here, and she's running a workshop, which I think some of you will be taking tomorrow. And I just want to I want to end with their voices about how some of these effects can come about. Is that all right? All right.
So first question, could you say a little bit about what the SMART mindfulness program was like for you?
The SMART program taught me a lot about mindfulness and meditation and ways to feel calm and reduce stress and to relax and improve my communication.
It was really helpful. I feel like it allowed me to be a lot more conscious of what I was doing, not just with my students, but mostly with myself in terms of my own reactivity to things and not always feeling like I had to immediately respond, that I could actually take a few breaths and get a handle on what I thought before I actually said anything. That's probably been the most immediately helpful thing in the classroom for sure.
Well, the program was great. I looked forward to it. Just loved coming here. Proved to be really motivational. Very good.
It was a real opportunity to explore how I feel in a variety of different situations. And my own instinct as a teacher tells me that the more I'm in touch with my own feelings, the easier it will be for me to be in touch with students' feelings.
Do you think this kind of program is helpful for teachers like yourself? And if so, why?
I think this program is definitely helpful for teachers because every teacher I know is super busy. There's a lot of demands placed on teachers, not just by the students and the curriculum, but also by parents and paperwork, and there just never seems to be enough hours in the day to get all of our work done.
And we work in a profession that is about relationships, so it is the mindful practices really have you focus and think about the whole communication piece. So as teachers, I think it's very important.
We had a cohort of teachers from pre-K to adult education, so clearly we all felt like there was a lot of benefit. I think mostly the community of being in league with your colleagues who are going through something similar and being in a space where not only there's some common ground, but there's common experience around how you've coped in the past and how that coping may not have served you. And so being more open to other ways to frame the situation and to be more of a problem solver.
This program really helps put things in perspective, and you have the same workload, but you can look at it in a different way and sort of approach it mindfully and calmly.
Can you give me an example or two of how this has affected you professionally and personally?
On a professional level, I think it's just simply helped me be more understanding of students and all the issues they bring with them into the classroom.
When I deal with people one-on-one, that includes students, I pay better attention.
I think the way that this class has affected me personally is that I'm more comfortable with quiet. I'm not needing to fill the airwaves every 5 seconds, which I think is a problem with a lot of teachers. We tend to want to talk a lot because we feel like that's our job.
Professionally, this has helped me from the very beginning of the day. I do the meditations in the car sometimes right before school, and when I walk in the door, I feel calm. I'm not rushing around like I used to do. I get the same number of tasks completed, but everything seems to take place at a slower pace, which has been really beneficial for me. Personally, I think the self-compassion component of this training has been really helpful. Just looking at things differently, knowing that you can start over the next day, knowing that you can be there for yourself, that you can really apply forgiveness and kindness to yourself, and it really changes your outlook.
Lastly, would you recommend the program to your principal and teaching colleagues, and why?
Without hesitation.
Absolutely, I would recommend this program.
Oh, absolutely. I think the program would be good for everybody I work with because in our shared environment, our relationships are with each other, and they're as much with each other as they are with the kids.
I absolutely would recommend this program to everyone because I think it would improve communication at school among staff. We would really recognize that we have a lot in common and that we could be helping each other through some of the stressful parts of our day.
One of the things that is an absolute necessity for successful teaching is availability, to be there for those students. And I think this program helps that.
I just want to end by thanking all my collaborators and funders, and also thanking you for being part of this journey. Thank you very much.